on a story that I do, I know that I'm being as balanced as I possibly can because I'm hearing it from the left, I'm hearing it from the right, saying you're clearly left or you're clearly right. You know, but when I hear it from both sides, then it was fairly balanced story. But perfect balance and objectivity in news is not possible.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Houston Ensemble podcast. We're here today on episode number 45, actually. 45 specifically, with Art Rascon. I had an interesting way of connecting with Art. I wanted to do something with the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, and I was put in contact with Art because he's the guy, the spokesperson, I'd say, to an extent, for Houston. And he's also an anchor on Houston ABC News. So, Art, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it's great to be here. Great to be here, Chad. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah. There's a lot that we want to get into, a lot of interesting stuff. As I was saying before we started recording, we've got the added benefit of hearing a little bit about the news side. You're being an anchor. I mean, that's just an interesting job, as is a big responsibility. And we got a lot to talk about. But Art, maybe for those who don't know you, could you kind of go into a little background about yourself? Are you tired of the government trying to calcify your pineal gland and turn you into nothing more than a working zombie? Look no further, because the Houston Ensemble has now been sponsored by the amazing Epic Water Filters. Tell us what they do, Armin.
Epic Water Filter is the only true filtration system you need. All these other filtration systems skip out on so many terrible chemicals and minerals that are still in your water and that you should not be drinking.
Fluoride, chromium, lead, all these other things that you do not want in your water. We've got water bottles with filters on them. We've got home installation filters. We've even got pitchers. Right now you can get 20% off any of these items on epicwaterfilters.com if you use our discount code Houston Ensemble, all lowercase, one word.
That's Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word, for 20% off your Epic Water Filter.
Sure. I was born in El Paso. Only lived there for a couple of years. Family took me to Santa Fe, then Albuquerque, and grew up in Denver. I come from a very, very large family. I'm the second of 9 children. My grandparents are immigrants from Mexico. My parents knew Spanish, but they didn't teach us much or anything because it was during that generation where if you spoke Spanish at school, for them, that they would be actually punished for speaking Spanish at school. So they wanted to help us become as Americanized, so to speak, as possible. So we didn't speak any Spanish in the home. But later, most of the kids ended up learning it anyway. Then I was educated at Brigham Young University in Idaho, Brigham Young University in Provo, 2 separate universities. And then I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Los Angeles. You're familiar, no doubt, with the thousands of missionaries there in Los Angeles for a couple of years, and it was a beautiful experience. Educated, married, my final year of my education there when I graduated at BYU, and then went to Abilene, worked there, El Paso, San Antonio, Los Angeles, the network at CBS News with Dan Rather. Worked out of New York for quite a bit, traveling the world, and as well Miami, based out of there, and then came to ABC. Wow. And I've been here in Houston now for 22 years. ABC is one of the flagship stations, Houston is, for the ABC company. And I've traveled the world with them, reporting a variety of stories.
Awesome.
Wow.
So
I've got so many questions.
Yeah, me too.
This will be really interesting. Okay, firstly, I just want to start a little historical. So you said your grandparents are from Mexico?
Yes.
Generally speaking, and by the way, just to get this out of the way, I know we talked about this on the phone, the proper, and for everybody who's listening, because I think this is a good learning experience, kind of the proper way to refer to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I may have put in a wrong.
No, you're
Of?
perfect. The Church
get my
of Jesus
ofs right?
Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's correct.
Okay. It's maybe not the best, most respectful way to say Mormonism, and I know we wanted to talk about where that came
Right.
from.
Mhm.
You didn't say it was disrespectful, but I do want to pay it as much respect as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is correct. The proper name of the church is not Mormons or Mormonism, but is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Maybe because I'm going to keep referring to it probably, and I'm going to stumble on that.
You can just say the church
The church. Beautiful.
or the Church of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Either
Okay,
will
that's a
work.
lot easier. But yeah, I want everybody to know that that's more of the proper way to go about it, especially since we're in a time where everybody's wanting to be proper about everything. So Mexican people are traditionally not of the Church of Jesus Christ.
You're right. You're right.
How did that start for your family?
Well, my grandparents are solid Catholics. My mother was a solid Catholic. My father's family had joined the church as a result of missionaries coming to them, and so they joined the church in El Paso. And then my mother, when she decided to marry my father, they had missionaries who came to their door, but my father was not an active member, so to speak, not really engaged within the Church of Jesus Christ. But in fact, I don't know that he even knew that he was a baptized member until the missionaries came and knocked on their doors, and they were taught about the gospel of Jesus Christ through the Book of Mormon and as well the Bible. And they decided to align themselves with it because they felt converted and compelled, spiritually driven to the church. And so my mother joined, and the church, she was baptized. My father was already baptized. They became active, and the rest is incredible because they had 9 children.
Right.
Half of them served missions for the Church of Jesus Christ, and then they have 50 grandchildren now, and that's a lot of grandchildren.
Yeah, it's a lot.
They have served missions throughout the world. They're all quite active within the Church of Jesus Christ. They have 33 great-grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And they're too young to serve missions for the church yet, but they will, because they feel like they need to do that. But it's been a beautiful, beautiful history of posterity. It's just been incredible. And I thank my mother and father for them deciding to join the church, only because I feel that we have benefited spiritually in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise benefited. When my mother joined the church, she didn't tell her parents or her family, who were strong Catholic, because she was afraid to.
Yeah.
But she eventually told them, and they said, "Okay, that sounds good. You seem happy," and they know that the Church of Jesus Christ is really family oriented, and they were completely happy with that.
Yeah.
So,
I do feel like that is a big thing. You usually see families from the church having big families, which is cool.
Yeah.
And it's actually nice.
Right. I mean, it's I don't know that it happens as much today as it did, many, many years ago. We have many children. We have 7 children. That's more than the 2.2 average,
Yeah. Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But our children are having less children, and I think it's kind of.
And that's a topic in and of itself, perhaps.
Yeah.
I have some theories on why that is, but we can get into that later.
Yeah. Obviously, birth control is one of the interesting issues that'll play into the religious aspect of it. Whereas, my dad was a really devout Catholic, actually, and he would, while I was growing up, he would say, sex is for nothing more than creating a child. And I think if you're serious about your religious beliefs, especially when it comes to that, that's really what it's for at the end of the day, like, to an extent.
Surely that's one of the purposes, but it's also to allow a husband and wife to be connected
Yeah.
and to grow as one. And as the scripture so beautifully teach as well, that we become one. And so that's the purpose of the physical intimacy, which is sacred and beautiful,
Right.
and is considered sacred and beautiful within the Church of Jesus Christ as well.
Talk to us about, because I know people are going to wonder, multiple wives in the Mormon Church. Speaking of big families becoming one, I know quite a bit about it, but I have talked to people before this episode, and that's one thing that they're curious about. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Sure. I mean, in today's age, of course, multiple wives are not permitted. This was something that was done away with in the Church of Jesus Christ back in the 1800s, in the 1900s, in 1898. So that manifesto was given, and the law was given by the prophet at the time to say, no, this is not allowed anymore, and anyone participating in multiple wives, in polygamy, would not be allowed and be considered a member of the Church of Jesus Christ. So, for more than 120 years, it's been like that. But still, people tend to, and sometimes will label us in that regard. But it's not what's taking place today. It hasn't been around the Church of Jesus Christ for 120 plus years.
Yeah.
And it is simply not allowed.
Yeah. And you're going to have people in every religion doing something that doesn't fit the whole script. You're going to have people who are fundamentalists who are like, no, I still believe it that way and it's my way, blah, 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 blah. But, I just wanted to make that clear for everybody. I wanted to let them know.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make clear as well that there are some who call themselves fundamentalist members of the Church of Jesus Christ or fundamentalist Mormons.
Yeah.
They are not associated in any way, in any degree, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. One of the big ones would be Warren Jeffs. Thank goodness he's in prison. If you don't know who Warren Jeffs is, I would go check it out. There's a documentary on it. But that seems like somebody who was mentally not right and then took the word and made it his own and affected all sorts of people in a negative way.
In an incredibly negative way, and it's so very sad.
Yeah.
I mean, to see the results of what happens when you really are disobedient to what God wants us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to say, because I haven't shared this with you, I personally come from a more of an Orthodox Christian background, specifically apostolic, which is one of the older sects, original sects of Orthodox Christianity.
Right.
Which kind of popped up more in the Transcaucasus region, which is Armenia, Georgia. If you're familiar with that region of the world, it's like it's like near the Middle East, kind of, for those who don't know. And so growing up was a lot of lighting up candles, a lot of prayer. And what happened was, and this might be an interesting topic, because what I saw during my teens was this emergence of, and people are going to take offense to this, but this is what I call it, is evangelic atheism. And what I want to explain that because, this chair, this evangelic atheism, where it became sort of a talking point to be rational, to demand the proof of God, to demand this, or people like Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris, a lot of the speakers that had an impact on that middle school, high school generation of kids that were growing into their own, having some realizations. And during this time, I myself got into that zone. But more recently, in the past few years, I'm actually retreating back to my own belief systems and a little more back into the spiritualism, because I'm finding that a lot of things tend to just go back to God, whether you accept it yet in your heart or not, And so that being said, I'm finding also younger kids going back to God more than ever. I think so. And what is happening? What do you think is going on? Do you think this is kind of a crazy question, but Do you think that there's an energetic war going on?
When you say energetic war,
Yeah.
I would agree in some sense, and that is, yes, there is a spiritual battle that is happening, a battle for that which is good.
Yeah.
We are involved in a war of good versus evil, and I think that we live in a world that is confused, where there is a lot of uncertainty, there is tremendous division, there is polarization which continues to grow and only increase. And I think that this drives many people to find some spiritual roots, as you discussed.
Right.
And this energy or spirituality comes, we believe, from the heavens. It is driven for us to be more spiritually sensitive because we are children of God. All of us. We're part of the family of God. We are brothers and sisters, so you as brothers, and part of the family of God, we begin to recognize our divinity and who we really are. So that kind of drives us closer to understand who God is and wanting to be more as he wants us to be, and having that spirituality within us. So if that can be termed the energy that is driving us in that direction, I honestly believe that. But I also believe we're involved in a war, a battle. This is a battle of good versus evil, where good today is being called evil.
Yeah.
And where evil is being called good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a confusing world for a lot of people.
I know Chad has some things to say about that, but I just want to clarify, and Chad, please go ahead. For our viewers, let's step back from Christianity for a second. There's an interesting Native American speaker who has a YouTube channel, and he's an old Native American teacher, I believe Cherokee. And he talks about a lot on his channel about the ancient Native American wisdom. And one of the things he talks about is evil disguised as good, which is kind of what you just mentioned, which is a very peculiar type of evil because that it can be very clever. It can be very clever. It can be so well disguised that most people would think it's good.
Yeah.
There's some things like that, and this is such a difficult territory because, for example, we talk about freedom, or we talk about allowing people the freedom to do things, but do we talk about the long-term effects of things that we advocate? Do we really know the impact psychologically that it has on people, these various fads, these various pop culture norms that the decadence, etc., whatever you want to call them? Do you think, in your mind, is there something an example of this kind of disguised evil that you think maybe should be addressed?
I don't know that I can point to anything directly or even want to, but I think generally speaking, everyone wants moral agency. The freedom to do what they want.
Right.
Why tell me what to do, they say. I just allow me to live my life and be who I want to be, whatever that person is, but give me the right to do it. And everyone protests these things and is demanding moral agency. But as you so beautifully said, eventually, they're not going to want to accept the consequences of that. We can choose moral agency, but we cannot choose the consequences of that moral agency. They, to us, go hand in hand. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we understand that agency, moral agency, and the consequences or responsibility or accountability go hand in hand eternally.
Right.
Moral agency is fine. But you know what? Let's be accountable.
Yeah.
And the society which we live today, we can clearly see that people don't want to accept accountability. We live in a litigious society. All around us, we have issues and problems. And some of these moral agency, political correctness views that continue to be extended will eventually perhaps result in a lot of negative consequences for not only families, individuals, nations, communities, and eventually goes against what we believe God wants us to do.
Yeah. And you know, the interesting thing is that I think you can even take away religion and 99% of people will know what is morally right.
Right.
Deep inside. They'll have all these things trying to pull them in one direction or another, a little distraction here or there. But when they put everything aside, they'll be like, I know that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that's always the hard part too, because it's usually not as convenient as you would like it to be.
That's beautifully spoken.
Yeah.
It's you're exactly right, because we believe that every person, every individual within them has deep inside of them this sort of soul and yearning to do good.
Yeah.
Because we are divine individuals, so to speak. We are spiritually born of God. We are all part of the family of God. So we have the ability to understand the light of Christ, which we believe is within each one of us.
Yeah.
And that light sort of drives us to do good and to know the difference, as you said.
So I want to get your opinion on something. There was and this has been a little blown over in the media, but I think it's good to talk about, especially in a real in-person thing rather than a Facebook comment section. This rapper, musician, Lil Nas X, put out a music video called Montero, I believe. I actually don't know what Montero really is about. Maybe that's the name of the place the music video took place in. And it's basically about him having sex with Satan and then actually killing Satan in the end, I guess. Or Satan has sex with him. I'm going to be graphic about it to an extent, because you have to be, because that's just the music video. And then at the end, he kills Satan and
Like takes over, kind of.
takes over, and it's in hell. It's like in kind of the Dante's Inferno, like circles of hell. And then on top of that, he's coming out with shoes that are all about Satanism, and they're only 666 available, and they all have a cc of human blood in them. And people, when I first see that, I'm all about express yourself. Be you. If you're gay, if you're bi, whatever. As long as you don't hurt other people. But this is not what that's about, really, at the end of the day. Especially when his primary listeners are youth, young,
they're kids,
teenagers.
Yeah.
They are. That doesn't really send out the right message. And because if it's about liberation, you would have done something, you could have or should have done something positive and filled with light. It doesn't need to be about Jesus, but it also doesn't need to be about Satan or a satanic figure who's raping you.
Yeah. Have you heard about this story?
I've read about it. As a journalist, it's my job to kind of know a little bit about everything,
right?
But not a lot about anything.
And but
yes, a little bit about everything. But I go ahead with your question.
As we know, things at that level of fame and fortune, i.e. Hollywood, i.e. the top of the top, the 1% music people, etc., there's really not a lot of creativity going on. It's usually an agenda, or usually it's written by somebody else and promoted by them for some specific reason. I mean, obviously what gets the most money.
Yeah.
But with that amount of power, don't you think you would want to do something that is filled with what we know as good? You don't look at that and say good.
Right.
You don't look at Satan solely for the symbolism of Satan and say that's good, that's liberation. It's like, no, that's actually dark.
But there's an attempt to skew it that way.
Right. And that's
to use it as a form of empowerment, which to me, and then I want to get your thoughts on this, it kind of feels like, well, okay, let's say you're suffering on the inside. You know, you've been affected somehow, and you want liberation from that. You want empowerment from that. Well, do you turn to a drug dealer because he gives you an ability for some sort of mental liberation? if you're in pain, let's say. You know, turning to sane when you're in pain, that's the analogy I think of, is like, it's like turning to a drug dealer when you're in pain. Yeah, it might help, I guess, but it's an interim help, and in the long term, you're kind of putting yourself in a negative energy for, God forbid, the rest of your life. Why not turn into, like Chad was saying, light? Why not turn into therapy, into healing, and bring yourself out of that instead of divulging in the darkness, which might give you some comfort temporarily? Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it makes perfect sense. But as you say, all it does is give someone a temporary comfort. It is never lasting.
Yep.
And it certainly is not eternal. There is a lot of darkness in the world today. There are a lot of negative influences. The media is, when I say media, I'm talking about newspapers, magazines, television, just all the onslaught of media. We have a glut of information out there trying to be pushed our direction. We need to decipher, we need to discern what is truly good and what is light, as you said. And I'll play off that for a moment. I'll build upon that because it's important. That the other elements naturally will bring in the darkness, that you spoke of. And even having the conversation, one feels, just a bit more dark than it should be. But when we speak of light, we speak of that which is good, that which is godly, that which is just and merciful and loving and kind. And those elements which bring in a great deal of light to be a positive influence in today's society instead of a negative influence. Do we need more negative influences in today's society? No. Clearly we don't. We want positive influences. So those elements, to us, to me, that's darkness. And I don't want darkness. I want light, as you speak of. And I want light because it brings in more peace. It is the difference between confusion and being lost and tranquility and being found with light and darkness.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that we can't speak like this, but like I said earlier, we just have it built into us, what is good and what is evil. And unfortunately, we need to be able to quantify and qualify it in a way that is more empirical, which is tough when you start to get into that subject, because of these kind of things getting twisted as something that's good for somebody's agenda, usually. But, that's neither here nor there to an extent. I have a little question for you, Art, about the media. There's something that came out recently. Are you familiar with Project Veritas at all?
I do not believe so.
Okay, Project Veritas is a group of journalists. It is a website. It's a journalism business, kind of about exposing fake news to an extent, just being as honest as possible. Veritas, truth. They recently exposed CNN by having multiple people go undercover. One of them was a pseudo Tinder date with the CNN technical director, Charlie, forget his last name. And basically, they're recording the whole time, multiple occasions. And he said, news is propaganda. COVID we use for all the gangbusters. When COVID's over, we need something else. So it's going to be climate change, and that's going to get the ratings up. He's like, and we need people dying on the side of the screen. The numbers aren't high enough. We need them dying. And it's like, wow. And of course he wouldn't answer to it when they confronted him in the parking lot of the restaurant. What are your thoughts on that? Like, now I'm not trusting CNN, but I'm not saying I'm trusting Fox either. I'm just saying.
Well, it's like you said earlier, like, obviously we know these agencies have their own spin.
Absolutely.
There's no question of that, right? But you can have your own spin and also not defame. You can have your own spin and also still investigate,
You don't have to
it's
lie.
okay to have a subjective opinion. That's okay, and that's gonna happen. But right, it's like it's not okay to lie though.
Yeah.
You know, I guess. Yeah, because I know this is a sensitive thing for you as a journalist.
Well, and here's the problem, and I don't know that it's a problem as much as it is the reason, and that is when I was growing up in the mid-'70s, and that kind of reveals part of my age. We had 3 television stations. We had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and we had PBS News. You know, and back during those times, they had to get out there and with a film camera and actually develop it before they got on the news, and it was always a day late. You know, news was old.
Yeah.
Well, how many television stations do we have today? How many accessible media outlets are there? There are hundreds. So the competition is a great deal different. So you have the opportunity, I suppose, of having specific media outlets drive themselves a certain direction to reach a certain segment of the population. MSNBC reaches a certain segment of the population.
Yeah.
Perhaps those that are a bit more liberal. Fox reaches a segment of the population that's perhaps a bit more conservative. But you have more opinionated news today than you ever did in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of the many outlets and the opportunity to do that. The middle of the road are ABC, NBC, and CBS. They're more middle of the road, but still everyone can claim what they want to claim, and I think they hear what they want to hear and sort of ignore everything else. When I'm called from both sides of the aisle on a story that I do, I know that I'm being as balanced as I possibly can because I'm hearing it from the left, I'm hearing it from the right, saying you're clearly left or you're clearly right. You know, but when I hear it from both sides, then it was fairly balanced story. But perfect balance and objectivity in news is not possible because it's a subjective business. And Fox may hire more conservative-minded people, and CNN might hire more liberal-minded people. But in the end, you have your choice. And you can watch and listen to whatever. But we need to be careful to make sure we are not listening to everything because a lot of it's negative. Journalism by its very nature will be controversial, will have an edge.
Right.
Otherwise, good stories usually don't sell, so to speak.
Right.
They literally don't. You don't get as many reactions from positive content.
And Charlie
just on a
said,
psychological level.
Charlie said that too. He said fear sells.
Yeah.
He said if it bleeds, it leads.
You know,
Fine.
and this is nothing sort of revolutionary.
Right.
Everyone kind of knows that. And so that's the avenue of journalism.
Right.
And their objective, of course, journalism outlets, they need to make money.
Right.
And I'm not saying anything about the way they're doing it, but we need to be more responsible as viewers, as listeners, and making sure that we are not just hearing what we want to hear and throwing everything else out, but that we are as objective in hearing and listening and learning and deciphering and making our own opinion from it.
And it's very tough, especially today when you said you have people on the left telling me something, you have people on the right and be like, oh, you know, you're probably conservative because you listen to this. I feel like, I mean, firstly, look at me. Do I look conservative? Stereotypically, no. Okay. Yeah, of course I'm a liberal person. I would actually say maybe if we put a label on it, which I do not like doing at all because I think everything is contextual, I'd say I'm close to being a libertarian. That's just a general ambiguous outline to give you some sort of idea of where I'm at. But today, because of how everything is going, I'll listen to Fox. I'll listen to Tucker Carlson do an expose on something. And I'll be like, based on everything else that I know and have been able to make sure is accurate, seems like he's telling the truth more than this other person, more than Don Lemon. Not saying Tucker Carlson is 100%, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that's what I'm experiencing
How
now.
dare you.
Right. And I see the fact that I even have to say all that,
Yeah.
kind of all these disclaimers for everybody watching. It's a little bit annoying. But that's why I'm really getting away from the labels, because I'm just about the truth at the end of the day and seeing the whole picture for what it is. And when you get more and more and more data on some specific incident, like some of the police shootings, you get the whole picture and not the 30-second picture. You'd be like,
Yeah, it's a multifaceted issue, right?
It's not black and white.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
it's not about being black and white sometimes.
No, you're absolutely right.
And that angers people
It does.
to talk like that.
Yeah. What the unfortunate thing about what the media, not that it causes this sort of division, but we need to be more, what we need more of is more love. What we need more of is more kindness and amongst each other, and not be politically driven, and which creates a great deal of polarization in the community.
Right.
If we are more kind and more loving, and I know those are platitudes that sometimes people just sort of ignore and say that's just too simple of a way to look at it.
The simple way is probably the best way.
But the simple way is the best.
Yeah.
But because if you look at, because this is sort of a religious topic as well, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believes, of course, in Jesus Christ. The church bears its name. We want to exemplify what he would have done.
And he's a
what
good
he
role
does.
model.
Right.
And that's the perfect role model.
Yeah.
That's the perfect teacher, the perfect example, the perfect leader.
Even if Jesus never existed, not a lick of him, blah, 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 all made up, it'd be like, well, that's really how we should live. Loving one another to the greatest extent, not hating anybody. Because you see today, like, people's hearts are in the right place in the sense that, oh, maybe we're seeing a lot of violence. Let's just go with police brutality for a second. You have the side saying there's too much police brutality, we need it to stop. They're using too much force. Your heart's in the absolute right place.
Yeah.
But don't also become hateful to the side that says, well, it's also hard to be a police officer.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it is so hard to be a police officer. And my mom was a police officer.
Right.
She's also black.
Mm.
Adds a whole little thing to it. So I've seen that, I've heard about it, and you can't hate anybody. And the moment you start hating people, even the worst people, that's when things get sour.
It doesn't, it never accomplishes anything, and it doesn't allow us to progress in a humane way through hate. I mean, hate is not the answer. It only causes greater division. And so when you see the protests out there, and there are many of them, the peaceful protests are fine. But when they involve hate and anger and vengeance against a company, against businesses on the side of the street, or against the police, or in whatever manner, then they've gone too far.
Yeah, and if you actually think about the big kind of OG civil rights movement that we think about in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, the most effective leaders that we think of at that time were peaceful. MLK, and then towards the end of his career, Malcolm X as well. You know, Malcolm was a little more strong in his rhetoric, but he sided with peace. And dare I say, because they were so peaceful, because they were so effective and so precise in their speech and in their teachings, I think that was the reason they were expunged, so to speak, by the powers that be.
But you look at the movements, and you're exactly right, that have created the greatest lasting legacy of change, and it comes from those, the Nelson Mandelas of the world.
Right.
Who changed the entire apartheid issue and reversed it. The Martin Luther Kings of the world, who created an incredible movement of civil rights. You know, the Gandhis of the world that brought the British nation to its knees by a simple fast. And those are the peaceful things, Christ-like almost elements in their lives that bring about the greatest change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I was going to say with that is too, just because somebody is associated with some group that has done another group wrong does not mean that you're obliged to hate them for some sort of moral victory or vengeance or something like that. Like Armin is Armenian, and when he meets a Turkish person, he doesn't be like, oh, don't even wash my feet, you know, because of how you wronged us. Yeah. And it's like we're actually not responsible for another person's actions. Right. And we shouldn't necessarily be held responsible for another person's actions. You have people fueling actions, no doubt about that, but
it's tough because in this world of division, we don't know what's true, we don't know what's up, we don't know what's good, what's wrong. It's so confusing because it's all been corporatized, it's all been spun. There's a market in everything. There's a market in things that are bad for you. There's a market in things that are actually damaging to you. Actually, those markets are the biggest ones, typically, because it's about indulgence, it's about hedonism. And and look, I want to have as much fun as anybody else. I'm not saying don't have fun. I'm not saying go out there and be adventurous. But if you look 5 minutes past your own ego, and you think about the future generations, and you think about your kids and your grandkids, you got to start thinking about what world they're going to live in. Right. You know, do you want a world in which everybody's self-medicating, nobody knows what's up and down, they're all cooped up at home, they're all glued to a propaganda machine, they're all hypnotized, they don't know how to think for themselves? Yeah. How do we have a safe world in which we can all really prosper and really go to an incredible trajectory as humanity when that is the case? That is not a world that serves humans.
What we need, and I'll always turn to the scriptures for the answers, because in my view, and in the view of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the world's problems will never be solved by the world's answers. Right. It can't happen. We'll eventually, they may temporarily bring some degree of happiness, but isn't that the adversarial tool of, you were speaking of Satan earlier, and clearly his role is to give you that temporary, momentary desire for pleasure or satisfaction, but the eternal consequences of that are lost. You know? Yep. So what we need to be concerned with are the eternal consequences, and the only thing that's going to bring eternal happiness is that which is found in the scriptures of doing good, being just, showing mercy, forgiving, being kind, not showing anger. All of these elements are attributes of Christ we need to exemplify. And by doing that, we would live in a far better world.
I think so.
Is if we follow those tenets. Yeah. Because the further we grow from the scriptural teaching of that, the more problems we're going to have. Yeah. And I think that's evident enough by just looking at society today.
I used the term like you did, Christ-like, with a friend earlier. And partly because I know he comes from a Catholic background, so he might relate to that notion. But what I found interesting is that he kind of had an adverse reaction to me saying that. Or he kind of used that in a way, because we were having a scientific discussion prior to that. And I was trying to explain my concept of truth and trying to create an internal barometer for what is actually good. And so I mentioned the term Christ-like, and he kind of used that to poke fun at me or to say, well, that's silly. And I think about that, and I'm like, man, even if you're not religious, what's wrong with trying to be Christ-like? Right. What's wrong with it? I'm saying be good. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
I'm saying be just. Right. You know, so let's not be distracted by the semantics or the propaganda of these terminologies are not good for whatever, you know. But that leads me to a question, and this is kind of a sensitive question. So, but we're trying to put on a show here a little bit. So, what can you say to an individual like Lil Nas who says, well, you know, I made this video because I've been berated and mocked and for who I am and what I feel like on the inside, and like people have made me feel so bad, and that's why I turned to Satan and this imagery. Like, that's why I express myself in these ways. Like, you know, and I see the point he's trying to say. Maybe he was betrayed by the people he thought were spiritual. Maybe he was betrayed by the teachings he thought were good.
It's hard to be gay as a black man in that sector.
Right.
No doubt about that.
And you know, it's a tough question, but we got to be able to address that concern of his somehow. So how do we address that?
If I had audience with this gentleman, I would simply talk about, you have such incredible influence, I would say. How do you want your legacy to look at you? I mean, how do you want even your posterity to look at you? You might be able to reach a select few with this type of attitude of how you're driving this. But if you want to reach even a greater mass, everyone wants to and understands the importance of doing good and being good and wanting that goodness or that light. Light will always, inevitably, drive out darkness. There's no question about it. Why not turn to the light instead of the darkness? Instead of that which is sort of, by its very nature, is sort of dark and depressive.
Right.
And people will not find their eventually and eternal happiness there.
Yeah.
And so we would have a discussion like that. Light will always drive out darkness, and why not move that direction and be of influence for good upon the lives of millions of people?
Yeah.
Instead of the limited few,
right,
which he has driving him right now.
Do you ever feel, I really agree with all that, and to go with that, do you ever feel pushed by ABC or Disney to be somebody that you're not?
No.
Or to not live your truth?
Never.
That's good.
And I have worked, and I'll talk about each point of my career. Abilene, El Paso, Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, I began working with ABC, the network. Then I went to NBC, or CBS, the network, and worked with the Dan Rather program for many years. Returned to ABC and traveled around the world. I've traveled to 80 countries doing stories everywhere. But I have never once felt compelled to write something a certain direction or to change my script because of whatever thoughts and intents of others on the management level. There is not some grand conspiracy to force us to do something. I have never felt as though, as a reporter, I was ever a puppet in the hands of somebody else.
Wow,
it was always my view of what I saw, what I witnessed, what I felt, the interviews which I had, that drove the story. Not my personal views, but everyone else's sort of combination of sound bites and material and elements, and from their lives that kind of made it a compelling story. So that's what's been my driving force, not anyone else.
That's
so
good.
I have
I'm
felt,
glad to hear that.
I have felt as though there's been a tremendous amount of independence in my career.
That's good.
If you were in charge of, let's say you had your own news outlet. Let's say you were in charge of CNN. You're the CEO of CNN. You're the chief CNN technical director. What are some of the pillars of reporting that you would ask to be kept true?
If I was to gather all the reporters together, I would say try and find the hopefulness and the faith, not spiritual faith, but the hope and the light which can be found and the positivity which can be found in all stories. Journalism by its nature, as I talked about, is somewhat negative. If you look at, it's always the bad news stories. When we look at the nation as a whole, and the headline is cases are climbing throughout the nation, but when you actually study it, you see 2 or 3 states where they're climbing and the rest of the numbers are dropping.
Right.
Okay? But the news story, the headline is not, the numbers are dropping throughout the vast majority of the country.
Right.
They focus on those 3 states where it's climbing. That's the bad news. Unfortunately, sometimes this happens. So I would advise and caution to say, be careful.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have your independence and you're a journalist. But attempt to be as objective as possible in this subjective world, and write the things that you feel are going to be impactful to someone's life in a more compelling way than giving a flash headline of bad news.
Right.
Something that would be deeper.
There's one interesting obstacle of this that I think is actually a manufactured obstacle, and I'll explain. So right now we know that negative headlines, just by the numbers, tend to do better, as you said. We also know that dark imagery and dark lyrics tend to do well too, like in music, right? It is my belief that the phenomena of darkness selling more is actually manufactured, and it's not authentic, and I'll explain. Most human beings want to have peace in their hearts. Most human beings want to hear the good news. Like, they hear the bad news, and that might shock them and cause that click, but really internally they want peace. If we created a society in which the demand for peaceful news and positive music was higher, to the point which people would click something positive and be like, yeah, this is it. I want to party to this. And they see something negative and they say, well, who wants that? That's like dark and lame and not fun, and it's going to make me feel bad. Why do I? Is it possible that we create this world? I feel like humans want that, but we've been kind of like, dare I say, brainwashed.
Yes, it is possible. And it's what we as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are attempting to do. We're not trying to baptize more people. We're not trying to grow the membership of the church. What we are attempting to do more than anything else is bring people closer to Christ so that they can share his love of more peace and less division, greater happiness and less hate. So that's the purpose. And yes, I believe it's possible. I believe people can change, and I believe deep inside, as you so eloquently said, that they desire something peaceful. They want to be happy in their families. They want to be happy in whatever life they're living, whether it's gay or transgender or whatever it might be. They want a sense of peace within them. And what we strive for more than anything is just helping people find peace and happiness and a sense of spiritual enlightenment in their lives.
And with that, being diligent about how they're finding the peace. Rather than getting that short, quick fix of like injecting yourself with something. Maybe hold off on the injection for 1 second, whether it's heroin, whether it's testosterone, to get real dicey.
Yeah, because
think about
what's more lasting, right? We can clearly say that's not lasting.
Right.
Everything that you discussed. It's that temporal satisfaction. Which always has a dead end road. And there's no lasting peace with that.
I want to ask you something about religious freedom, because that's actually under attack right now in this country. Do you think that people should be forced to receive the new vaccine?
No. I think it's an individual choice. It really is. Although, there might be organizations or even religious organizations that say, we recommend you take this. But everyone needs to have that moral agency. But understand that whatever consequences come from that choice, if you get something down the road that's going to kill you, then that's your own fault.
Oh yeah, you made that.
And I hate to say it so harshly, but I think that yes, people should have an individual choice.
That's good.
Yeah.
I personally feel the same way. I don't think anybody should be forced to really take any sort of foreign anything at this point. And I'm saying that from an actual research perspective. I wouldn't just say that out of my head. When you look at everything, when you put everything together, you say, okay, well, I think it'll be okay. I think if you want to get it, you should be okay. I'm happy to hear you speak that honestly about it, because you would maybe I would assume that there'd be pressure on you to say otherwise, which is interesting, but you didn't say otherwise.
No, in fact, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you're asking for the stance on that, the church leaders have suggested and recommended that we take the vaccine. They took the vaccine. I take the vaccine. I took the first dose. But it is an individual choice and responsibility which each person needs to make.
Yeah.
We agree with that.
I'd like to clarify, because some people will make the argument, well, there's a couple of things they might say.
Yeah.
They might say, well, how should we reach a herd immunity?
Right.
How do we guarantee that the cases disappear? How do we guarantee that we're protected? If people looked past those headlines that we spoke of, those quick sound bites, and spoke to the leaders of immunology, of virology, the true top of the top. I'll mention maybe not some names, because unfortunately a lot of these names have been censored and disparaged and smeared. But we're talking about ex-chiefs of Pfizer. We're talking about top virologists of the Melinda Gates Foundation, who are saying that this should not be mandated, and actually they recommend that fewer people would take it, because at the pure scientific basis, immunity is strengthened by healthy choices, not by anything you put in your body, which may help. It may help. But immunity, the human body, is incredible. The human body actually destroys bacteria and viruses constantly. And a healthy human body is able to do this extremely efficiently. And what you want to do in the long term is support a system in which that natural immunity is strengthened. When you over-sanitize and you over-inoculate, you're depleting that natural defense system.
Right.
And the most basic fundamental science is resolute on that. There's no one is arguing that. But again, you gotta sell the headline. And that,
or you gotta make a buck.
You gotta
in
make
general.
a buck. Pharmaceuticals gotta make a buck.
And you know what was interesting? The other day, I haven't watched regular, just like on TV. Haven't watched regular TV in a while. It's usually more of YouTube or the website, and we won't hold you for too much longer.
Yeah,
I know it's about time to go. But I saw a commercial with a doctor saying some stuff about thrombosis and clotting, and I said, "Is that a prescription?" Because I was finally seeing all the prescription commercials again, which is just so. There are so many, and I hadn't seen that in a long time. And then I was like, "What was that commercial about?" And then I went back and I rewinded it and I listened again, and this doctor just walks out of the room and she said, if you're experiencing depot thrombosis, you may want to see a doctor. This will include blood clotting. This will include pain in your leg. This will include pain in your arm. Please visit this website if you're feeling like this. And then I noticed that the commercial was sponsored by Pfizer. And what I thought was interesting was thrombosis is the ailment that is connected with the vaccine.
Yeah.
Not a ton, but too much. It's like how many people should suffer for the benefit of other people? It's kind of like the trolley thing. Do you kill 10 or do you kill 1 to save 10? Something like that. And so what's interesting is that when you're kind of aware of these things and you're reading a little more about the science and what's happening, you'd be like, wow, they are actually putting it in front of our face that there could be something wrong. And they do just say, go visit this website. But we can't necessarily have these discussions because people automatically think, oh, you're anti this and anti. No. I'm just about data, empirical data.
Right.
And yeah, people are benefiting as well, but I'm also, I don't leave the people who are getting hurt behind either. I would try not to, and I hope nobody else would either.
Yeah. Well, that's perfectly said as well, and your comments about the beauty of the body. It's incredible what our bodies can do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just no doctor can understand the immune system the way God put it together. And it's incredibly resilient. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I mean, when our kids were eating dirt outside, I said, let them eat dirt. It'll strengthen their immune system. So it's all part of a process of understanding what we should do and what we should take into our body. I'm not generally one who takes vaccines. I'm not. I mean, I haven't taken the flu vaccine in 3 decades.
Yeah.
And I don't have the flu. But it's just you kind of just choose what you feel would be best and go from there.
And on a funny note, I just learned this last night. I'm vegan, and these vaccines aren't vegan, so it's not going to work out for me. But that's a huge part of what we're into, just literally well-being for all people and animals.
And you know what? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has one of the most incredible health codes that you would find anywhere in any religion. We don't drink. We don't smoke. We don't, drink coffee.
Yeah, caffeine, right?
No caffeine. So caffeine in a coffee sense as well. We don't do drugs. We try and stay healthy in exercising. And all of this activity lends itself to a much stronger immune system. Mm-hmm. I mean, we should not be morbidly obese.
No.
We should be living lives in which we're showing moderation in things we eat, and especially those things we, the evils or the vices of society.
Right.
The so-called, the sin tax things, the cigarettes and drinking. So we stay away from those things, and we believe we're healthier because of it.
And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 57 years old.
So you're going to want to take Art's advice because you do not look 57 one bit.
Thank you.
And it's like, we should take somebody who is living that life of health, take their advice, not take the advice of some, sickly, obese person saying, hey, get this shot and go get yourself a Krispy Kreme.
For free for a year.
For free for a whole year. But hey, with that, it's been about an hour. We know you got a lot to do. Art, thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah.
It's been a blessing to be here. You've been wonderful, Chad.
Yeah,
You've been
thank
terrific.
you.
And
Armin.
Armin. Thank you so much. You've had some surprising questions, I might say. But
we like those questions.
But it's been a fascinating conversation.
And
thank
with that,
thank you.
We want everybody to know, open up your mind. If you're thinking one thing, for example, about the Church of Jesus Christ, open up your mind and let it be known that we're all more similar and actually all striving towards the same goal. And it's all about love at the end of the day. So with that, like, subscribe, check out the Houston Ensemble. We're on all the streaming platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on BitChute, etc. Your support is
Joe
greatly
Rogan,
appreciated.
we're coming for you.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Amen. See you later.
3, 2, 1.